And now we're going to have a really special guest. Erin's going to tell us how to do all this and make a place at the table for everyone, and then followed by our own beloved bishop.
Hi, I'm Erin, and I am a lifelong Methodist, and I'm so excited to be a part of this group today. This has been amazing. It's really inspiring to see the way that our denomination has evolved and grown over the years that I've been a part of it. So thank you for having me today, and thank you for hosting this group. My work has mostly been in the churches, in the local church for over a decade, working with families. And I'm really interested in raising loving, open-minded, socially justice members who welcome all to experience God's love. And my passion and work in the church of sharing God's love with all of God's children led me in a kind of mysterious way to the Mountain Sky Conference. Isn't that how God works? And I'm really excited to be able to work and walk through with these churches as they, in the Mountain Sky Conference, we're going through a time of growth and transition as we create inclusive spaces and beloved communities for those who haven't always felt welcome in our religious spaces. So as we're thinking about ways of creating inclusive conferences and churches and beloved communities like we've been talking about this morning, I want to share a little bit with you about what the Mountain Sky Conference did and is doing, actually, through a table for all. While this work is specific to our conference, it can be tailored to work in other conferences and even in congregations or groups or communities as they seek to create inclusive and welcoming churches. As you know, our churches and conferences in the United Methodist Church are unique in many ways in geographical, political, and social makeup. And this is absolutely the case in the Mountain Sky Conference, which is composed of 374 churches throughout a very broad and vast geographical area of Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, and a small section of Idaho. So we have churches in rural, urban, and suburban communities, which makes things very different and unique. And a lot of our churches are in smaller rural communities and maybe more conservative areas of our country. And these churches might be the only grace-based congregation for miles that individuals have. So the need for these congregations to remain vital and relevant members of their communities is important to continue God's love and grace to all reaches of our community for all of God's children, especially now. Back in 2019, when discussions were revisited about a split in the denomination, we knew that these congregations and all of our congregations needed our support now more than ever. With declining church attendance and the increasing polarization throughout our country, assistance at this time was vital for congregations who wanted to remain Methodist, but needed help doing so as they might face a loss in membership or donors. Then as COVID hit, and we all know what fun that was, we had to shift and change even more because more churches were feeling the need for help and assistance to continue their ministries and be able to impact and share God's love with all. So as we sought to celebrate our connectional ministry, and in an effort to continue to share God's love with everyone throughout our rural, urban, and suburban communities, we created a table for all, which is a support system to help these congregations as they reimagine and revitalize their ministry for the future. We see this as an opportunity to be on the vanguard of our evolving denomination, setting up our congregations for the future and offering safe spaces in all of our conference. Our work has two components to it. The first was to create a support system to help churches who had experienced sudden and traumatic change but wished to remain United Methodist and needed help doing that. And two, to educate our congregations in our conference about the mission and vision of a table for all while raising funds to support the work. To support the churches who wanted to come to the table and work to reimagine their ministry, our Committee on Congregational Vitality created a 3-year application-based support system for those churches who, again, had experienced sudden and traumatic change, wanted to remain Methodist, and were willing to put in the work to reimagine their ministry to be more neighbor-centered in the 21st century. Our plan is to provide financial aid and ministry support for those congregations most in need and capable of using the change they've experienced as a catalyst for their transformation and growth. But to make this work possible, we need money, right? Because everything costs money. So that's where I came in. And I've been working with the Committee of Pastors and Lay Leaders since February 2021 to raise awareness and funds. Our efforts have raised over $800,000 of our $1.2 million goal so far. This has been achieved by asking major donors to contribute in our quiet phase. At annual conference this past summer, we launched this program to our local churches with the goal of sharing our mission and vision, celebrating our connectional ministry and supporting one another, and fully funding this project. We also want to encourage all churches in our conference to go outside of their building, to focus more on their communities and how they can meet the needs of those around them. This fall, just 5 months after our public launch, we will have over 50 churches host a Table for All Sunday, where they will spread the word of our mission and vision and help to raise funds, with more hosting in early 2023. We will begin our first cohort of churches to do in our support system in early 2023, with another one starting in 2024. The work looks like 3 years worth of very intense going through programs of figuring out, is my building too big? Do I need a smaller staff? Do I need a larger staff? Do I need a different staff? How can we become more neighbor-centered? What kinds of things does our community need? What kind of work should we be doing? What does our ministry look like? How can we be relevant to the people that are with us instead of just staying within what we've always done in our building? As I mentioned, this work is specific to our conference, and since each conference and congregation is different, each will need to find their own right project. But when thinking about creating inclusive churches and conferences, I'd like to share some of the things we've learned that might be helpful to any projects you might consider. First, know your audience and create something authentic for their needs. As you know, there's no one size fits all for churches. Knowing your churches and conference needs and how you can support them individually will allow you to tailor the program and build confidence and trust. Had we created a program that was only relevant for larger churches, we would have not seen success or buy-in from our smaller congregations, which is actually a large portion of our makeup. So we would have lost people right off the bat. 2, meet churches and people where they are and embrace differences. We've talked a lot about differences this morning, and knowing that all churches and congregations and people are in different places is really important when you're working on bringing people forward in movement and change. It's important to also offer different levels of participation, knowing that everyone will be in their own situation. Not everyone will be at the same point or at the same place in their journey. Knowing that not all congregations and communities will have the same things they need to focus on. When we accept our differences and the places where each church and person is, we are able to build trust, create authentic involvement, and foster beloved community. Although I would love for each one of our 374 churches to be fully on board with the Table for All Sunday, to host a Table for All Sunday and raise thousands of dollars, I know that's not the case. Some will engage in this work and others will not. I know that I cannot make everyone participate in this work, because right now is a tender and sensitive time for a lot of our churches to ask for money. They may be facing older buildings that need repairs with dwindling budgets and declining participation. I always have to be clear that I want their involvement to be authentic with where their congregation is, and I want them to engage when and how they can. This initiative is for everyone, no matter what they can contribute. 3, work with those who are willing to engage in transformation, even if it starts off small. Not everyone is going to engage in this work, as I mentioned, and that can be discouraging. But continue working with those who are willing and slowly build your team through time, through educating, building trust, and being authentic. Sometimes people need to hear the message several times before they understand it and engage with it. 4, build relationships with churches and individuals. This is crucial to having them being involved. By far, the best involvement I've had is from churches and pastors that I've been able to meet with one-on-one to listen to their needs, figure out where they are and how they can be a part of our journey. 5, when creating a support system for churches or groups, be clear on any expectations you create. Our program for support is an intense 3-year plan that churches apply for and are accepted to, and it requires engagement from church leaders on many levels. We are very clear that this is not a handout to prop up a dying church, but a program for true transformation. By providing specific expectations and milestones, churches that will engage in this work understand what they're signing up for, and more importantly, donors have confidence when investing in this support system. 6, be willing to do things differently. I know change is hard for churches. I worked in one for a long time, but we have to do things differently if we want to make radical transformation. So be willing to do things in different and unique ways. Look for other industries outside of the church for best practices. For example, when fundraising, use the principles that large organizations use. Think about that large football stadium or a brand new hospital named after someone in your community. In the past, we've always launched large initiatives straight to our congregation and end up getting weak results. This time, we decided to try things differently. Following these fundraising principles, we sought out large donors to give to the fund to first demonstrate that this work was important and individuals had already invested in the work. This gave us huge credibility and caught more attention by launching our program with $800,000 to start than if we had started at zero. So if you're fundraising, I highly recommend borrowing fundraising principles from that world, including one-on-one asks, sharing specifics about the program for potential investors so they feel confident in what they're investing in, and following up with consistent and regular communication. 7, utilize storytelling. We shared lots of stories of ways that people were impacted through our churches and our conference as a way to build community and trust. This showed people why it was important that we set a table for all and why it was important that churches come along for this work. 8, this one I'm a little bit biased on. If you can hire someone outside of the church, do it. I worked in churches and I know that pastors and staff are stretched thin, trying to do a million things at once. So if you're trying to take on a large initiative of creating inclusive churches, it's hard to be forward thinking and have a long-term vision because the pastors and staff are always worried about programming and what the latest crisis is. But having someone who's dedicated in the work can be critical in moving it forward. Because this is my focus, I've been able to work front and center. Even if it's a regular volunteer, someone who can be dedicated to that process of creating the inclusive church, also gives someone a person that can provide regular, consistent support for pastors and congregations and groups within the congregation. And 9, when you're making room for inclusive churches, make it easy for them to participate. If you have documentation that you'd like to provide and resources, then that helps make their job easier as they spread the word. In my work, we created videos, bulletin inserts, social media graphics, worship slides, announcements, etc., to give to churches so they could share the word and mission of a table for all. We also need to think about ways we can make it more accessible. meaning offering subtitles in our videos for those hearing impaired and materials translated in Korean and Spanish. And last, no matter what kind of work you're doing to create inclusive churches, the most thing I can say is provide feedback on what work you've created and how it's going. That's something that we've received a lot of information on, that people want to know when they're working on a large initiative. How's it going? What have you done? How's the work moving forward? So sharing in newsletters and emails and annual conferences and creating videos has really helped to continue to move it forward and to help people see how our work is coming. And that brings along more people as we go.